Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast with Ani and Brian. Join us as we explore the art and science of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools to strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional. Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you'll understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence. If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. Hey there, Brian.
Hey, Ani, how are you?
I'm really good. Happy Independence Day.
Happy Independence Day.
In the U.S.
In the U.S. anyway, it's Independence Day. And so if you are checking in from anywhere in the world, happy Independence Day for whatever your national Independence Day is, if you have one.
Or for independence for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And then when we're done talking, Brian and I are going to go jump in the lake because that's what we do for 4th of July.
I've got my picnic shirt on.
Oh,
see, I've got my
that?
cookout shirt.
Nice. Yeah. We're gonna. It's actually a big family holiday because we live on Lake Champlain in the Adirondacks, and everybody comes up to the house, and we spend time hanging out in the lake, hoping it's not too cold because that happens some days.
It does. Sometimes it's hot outside, and the lake is like ice cubes.
Yeah, and sometimes it's warm. And who knows? Just depends on which way the wind blows that day.
Yeah, we just don't know.
Yeah.
So
but anyway,
here we are today to talk about an independence of sorts. And
independence of self.
Independence of self and of sorts, exactly. How can coaches help clients to declare their independence from lower emotional states?
I think this is something a lot of people really, really want. They don't want to feel angry. They don't want to feel helpless. They don't like it, Brian. Sam, I am.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the work that obviously we do at the Somatic Coaching Academy and with Somatic Coaching is to help people shift and change their emotional states into more productive, more pleasant, more fill in the adjective, fill in the blank after that.
Yeah. And one of the ways we actually do that is by helping people to, first of all, understand how to work with their sensations rather than their emotions, right?
Yep.
Which is very different than how a lot of people go about dealing with emotions. We also do it by modifying sensations. And I think that's really important because I remember for myself years ago, back in the day, I used to want to rid myself of a negative emotion or, try to eradicate it, blow it up, put it in a box, stuff it in the closet. But I knew the stuffing in the closet wasn't going to work, but I didn't want to look at it and I didn't want to feel it, like all of these things. But actually learning how to modify has been a really powerful part of that independence process for me because it helps me to understand that I actually do have empowerment specifically around my sensations.
Yeah. And that's what I love so much about the work that we do. It's a really practical way to help people make that leap from what we would call maybe a lower emotional state to a higher emotional state.
So you're sounding kind of judgy here. There's certain emotions that are low and there's certain amount of emotions that are high.
Yeah, there's not a sense of judgment around it.
I'm just wondering where you're getting that information
Where
from.
I'm coming that from. Well, we're going to share a framework in just a second that I find has been really, really helpful in my work personally and also my work professionally with clients over time. Some people that really kind of resonate with it, if you want to just kind of.
Is that a key word?
Seeding that word in there.
Write the key word down, everybody.
Exactly, kind of resonating with because, a lot of times what I notice working with clients and with myself as well, that there may be like a tendency, let's say, to experience a particular emotional level or state. And even sometimes if we feel like we can shift it, it feels like we get dragged back into it again. And it almost feels like a black hole. Like there's a lot of inertia. No matter what we do, we kind of get pulled back into it. We might have some opportunities where we experience something different, but then we get kind of pulled back in again. Like there's kind of like a, I don't want to say default because that's not really what it is so much. But there's kind of like an anchored state that we tend to spend most of our time in if we're not really trying to do something different.
I like the word inertia because that resonates for me
Mhm.
as in what you're talking about. Like there's some states that are just, it feels like full of inertia and they're kind of hard to get myself out of, but I think what I'm hearing you say is like getting yourself out of these like baseline states.
Mhm.
It just can be really tough.
Yeah. And when we,
It can
and when
feel really tough.
it can feel really tough. And when we are in those states, our, it's not only our emotions that are a part of that state, but it's also the way we're thinking about things, certainly the way we perceive the world
Yeah.
is colored and informed by those states. You might even say that our consciousness, the way we experience consciousness, is informed by those states.
Yeah, what you're saying about kind of perceiving reality, which sounds kind of when we're looking at the world and we're perceiving reality, there's this element of like it is like that.
Yeah. Mhm. Right.
So it's even funny to talk about, right? Because when we're perceiving reality, we don't know that's how it is. But have you ever had the instance where something's really bugging you and it's like, no, this is what's happening, and then all of a sudden either you feel better or something happens that lightens it up and it's the same thing that's happening, but all of a sudden it's not such a big deal anymore.
Mhm.
Like I think that's kind of interesting from behind our own eyes, but also like you and I, of course, being life and business partners, this happens all the time with us where we're looking at the same exact thing and I'm perceiving it one way and you're perceiving it a different
Mhm.
way, and I'm like, why don't you see what I see? Or you would say to me, why don't you see what I see? But we're actually experiencing reality different.
Mhm. Yeah. And there's no judgment around that at all. And maybe we can also say that when we are emotionally experiencing those things differently, and when we are thinking about those things differently, when we are perceiving that same thing differently, might we say that we are kind of coming at it from two different levels of consciousness?
Sure.
If consciousness is kind of, if we think about how we feel, how we think, how we perceive, if we bundle that all into the idea of consciousness, which I think is probably a fair way to think about it.
I think it's an easy way it's a practical way to kind of conceptualize something that's very difficult to
Mm,
talk about.
yeah. And so I know for me, working with clients and with myself, I'm be curious to how you relate to this. But some of the most profound changes that I've seen clients make is when they have what you might call a leap in consciousness. So it's when there's a very clear movement from one level of consciousness to another level of consciousness. And it's not just like an emotion changes, but their perception changes, the way they're thinking about it changes, the way they relate to everything changes. Everything, not just that thing that they're struggling with, but everything in their whole reality, they relate to it differently when they have a leap in consciousness.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about watching people go through that is this element of not even remembering how things were before. But of course, we're
Yeah.
watching and helping and guiding and whatever. And I just had this happen the other day where a client showed up for a client session and we did some like real major work on perceiving their reality different and shifting their level of being, their level of
Mhm.
consciousness. And now they showed up to a session and they couldn't even remember, like, it was like a distant memory around the thing. We were just like, it was really,
Mhm.
really big for them.
Yeah.
And then it's like totally different. And they're like, oh, yeah, that thing. Yeah, I barely even remember that. But they had to be reminded because all of a sudden you're just in this new place.
Yeah, right. So that's I think hallmark of change or shift in consciousness.
Totally.
So
It's wild what watching is just like so
yeah,
much
it's really
fun.
amazing. So one of the models that I love to use comes from a classic work of written literature by Dr. David Hawkins called Power versus Force. And so you're familiar with Power versus Force?
I
I
have
know
read it
you've
a
read
few
it
times.
because the copy I'm reading right here
Does it have my name
has
on it?
all of your lines
Oh.
and highlights in it. So it's one of our shared books where
Hey.
we steal it back and forth from each other's offices.
Uh-huh.
Right now, it's taking up time in my
In your
office. It's like
it's
it's leasing
on
space in my
sabbatical in your
office.
office.
Exactly. So
Uh-huh.
we have books that go back and forth. And it's like, where'd that book go? Well, you've got some of my books in your office too over there. I know. I'm watching you. I know where they go, sort of thing. So, but I love the model of this work that Dr. David Hawkins talks about. So Dr. David Hawkins does a lot of work around kinesiology, muscle testing, and has done testing with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, creating what are called logometric measures, or levels of vibration or levels of resonance for certain states of consciousness. And he's got a really useful map in the middle of the book called this map of consciousness.
Yeah, it's so good. I actually do use it quite a bit with myself
Yeah,
and my clients.
it's a great, I'm not sure it'll show up on the camera here or not. Probably won't very well, but that's kind of what it looks like right there. And so on the camera, we're seeing a map of consciousness on the book.
You could Google it.
You could Google it. You could kind of find it on your own, sort of things. But this is a map I love to use to help people declare their independence from lower emotional states, so that when a client can see themselves on this map, then it puts their emotional experience in context to other potential emotional experiences. And it also gives us a framework of a ladder of how to climb.
Right. That's
right.
one thing I really like about it.
Because so many people are like, listen, let's look at one of these on the map of consciousness here is a lower state of consciousness. Look at the lowest one is shame. So when we experience shame, we are resonating at 20, a logometric measure of 20. And then what I love about the map too, he's got an emotion that goes with each one of these levels, the process that's going on in a person, the life view, the kind of universal view or God view that's happening at that level. So you can kind of find exactly, kind of dial in where you're experiencing. But if someone has experiencing shame at like a 20, the emotion associated that with is humiliation, shame and humiliation. A lot of people are like, listen, I just want joy in my life. I just want joy in my life.
Yeah.
And that's a great aspirational thing to have. And
It's
however, we
very
look
far
at
from
joy
here.
on the map is like 540. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 levels above shame. And so that aspirational desire to have joy, which is wonderful, is also almost impossible to get to directly from shame, which creates more shame.
Exactly.
And that's how shame works, right? I mean, that's part of the shame's game.
And
The shame
back you
game
go.
kind of does that. It's like wish for something really big that you'll
Yeah.
never have when you can never get it. And then
like
you can have more shame.
It's like Chutes and Ladders, Brian,
Yep.
right? Like there's like in Chutes and Ladders, it's like one ladder that goes like all the way to the top, and there's one chute that goes all the way down. But like that's a really far way, right?
Yeah.
Most people have to take step by step.
Step by step.
Yeah, and that's not what we hear out there on Instagram and stuff, by the way.
Right.
It's like claim your joy, be in joy, and a lot of the clients that we work with, they're not there. They've got some stuff going on, and you have to deal with it so you can move up the ladder.
Yeah. Can I share some? I know it's like Independence Day, and so we're supposed to be like happy and enjoying the picnic. But I wouldn't be Brian without bringing a little bit of
Debbie Downer,
throwing a little bit of lemonade on this party.
Okay.
And not the sweet kind of lemonade, but anyway, if I could just share just a couple of statistics from the book. Because what I think it does, it could kind of feel like a little, oh man, we are really in trouble here. But at the same time, I think knowledge is a foundation for power. Let me put it that way. I don't think knowledge itself is power, but it's a foundation for we can take off from when we know where we're starting from.
Okay.
So, and in the map of consciousness, what he talks about is that at about 200, a resonant level of 200 is where we move from a positive or empowering emotional state away from something that is more one of those inertia states that keeps pulling us back down, or a negative or destructive state. So there's kind of a tipping point between the two. So I'm not placing a value judgment on here. If we just say that certain emotional states actually are life-giving, energetically, they give you more fuel and give you more life. And there's other emotional states that are life draining. They take energy away. And so whatever one that anybody wants to experience is perfectly fine with me. It doesn't, that's okay.
And that's being human too.
That's being human, sure. But I think a lot of the people that we work with, they have a desire, they want to experience emotional states that are more life-giving rather than life-taking. And on this level, about this resonance level of 200 is kind of the breaking point of where you move from a emotional state that is life draining into one that is more life giving. And I like that line is, I think, fascinating to kind of work with, because what the book was written in 1995. And what Hawkins says, and so at least in 1995, and by looking around the world, I don't think these probably numbers have changed very much. If anything, they've maybe slid down a little bit just by kind of looking at what's happening. But he's saying that 85% of the human race, 85% of the human race, like on the planet, is below 200.
Yeah. Okay.
So exists in emotional states that are life draining, not life giving.
I'd be really interested to see these statistics now, because as you're saying, like, I'll bet they've slid down a little bit. Part of me is like, yeah, I'll bet. And then part of me is like, yeah, but there's probably a lot of people who are resonating higher too.
Yeah,
which we can talk about later.
Yeah, so here's how the numbers work. So you have to understand how logarithmic scales work. So 85% of the population is resonating below 200, but the overall average human resonance is 207.
Yeah.
So a little bit above. Now the highest scale is 1000. So like that's still like there's a lot of room above that 200, but the break even point is at that 200. So you might think, how does that work if 85% of people are below 200, but the average is 207? Like only 15% of the population is above 200. So
yeah, but it takes
how does it work?
Less people in that higher resonance to actually counteract.
Exactly, because the higher the level of resonance, the more it the more it's worth, if you will, the more power it has, the more influence it has over the whole average. So it's like a weighted scale.
Yeah.
The higher up the scale you go, the more energy that the system has. So only 4% of humans on the planet resonate above 500. And like
in 95.
In 95, and 0.4 like above like 540 or something like that. And like to resonate above 100 is like 1 in like 10 million people. So there's like not many people resonating at that level. But when I read this book for the first time, over a decade ago, what really occurred to me is that if we can just move our level of resonance up just one level, you can have a profound impact on hundreds of other people around the globe that you've never met before. Like, so it's not just like if you're resonating at 400, it's only not the people you meet in the grocery store. It's not just the people in your neighborhood that you're affecting. It's actually energetically, it's people
everywhere,
all over the globe.
Yeah.
You can ease suffering in Bangladesh or in Africa or in Europe, or I mean, obviously I'm located in the States, or in Nebraska, from just elevating your own level of resonance, your own level of consciousness, moving it up that scale.
This is actually one of the big reasons that when we started certifying people, that we've always run kind of intimate, smaller group programs really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the idea that we could deeply impact a relatively small group of people's lives because of this information, knowing that we don't have to reach everybody. But when we reach 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 40 people a year, we're making a massive difference in the resonance of the planet. It also, and we talk about this with the students sometimes, because our students develop these really deep relationships with their cohorts that they go through, but they're often not near each other in proximity. And we talk about how it's actually important that we are not all living in the Adirondacks in New York together, even though we joke about that, having a little, community where we all live together. It's actually important that we're spread out over the globe, because that is where we need to be to keep increasing the resonance all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so thank you so much for bringing that up, Ani. And I love those consistent reminders for myself that what I love to do is just that the deeper work with people, because I know that if we can help 1, 2, 3 people really change deeply, it has a massive impact around the globe.
Yeah, this work really, I keep it in mind all the time, actually. At the end of my day, when I've had 3 or 4 phone calls with people, and I know that, they're changing their level of consciousness. We're not
Yes.
just helping them to have a better day, which is great, or to meet a goal, which is great. We're helping people to change their level of consciousness. And I feel very fulfilled and on purpose at the end of the day, knowing that I had 3 or 4 or 5 calls with people who are changing their level of consciousness, and the ripple effects and the massive impact that that makes in global consciousness.
Yes. Yes.
Like, I know it without a doubt.
Yeah. So a lot of the people, again, that we're working with are really trying to get like over that 200 hump, right? Maybe not a lot of people, but I think that's the inertia, get pulled back below that level.
Well,
We want to get over that hump.
I think as I've witnessed it, Brian, I think a lot of people actually want to be at the higher states of consciousness, but they wrestle right around that line. Like, that's kind of exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And they want to get up higher, and actually that's one of the things that I appreciate so much about the sensation-based model that we use, tied in with the natural laws of the universe. Because when people learn the natural laws of the universe married with the sensation-based approach, they are actually living at that higher place of consciousness, in a way that, because I've used this method for years and years, and then watched different people who use different methodology, and they can help people to kind of like bridge that line gap and maybe hover right about at or over the line. But it is a very rare person who I've seen been able to transcend up into the higher levels sustainably without using a sensation-based approach.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree. 100%. 100%. Can we talk just a little bit about how we might use a sensation approach to just kind of walk up these levels? So, so I'm just going to kind of label off these bottom levels for a second. So we already talked about shame is at the bottom, and then above that is guilt, and then above that is apathy, and then above that is grief, and then above that is fear, and then above that is desire, and then anger, and then pride. Pride is the top emotion that drains energy. But pride is a goal.
It's the highest of the lowest.
It's the highest of the lowest. But pride is a goal if you consistently experience anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt or shame.
Yeah.
So actually walking up towards that pride. Now, one of the things he talks about in the book is that actually where we are in human evolution at this point is pride is where we're stuck. Because pride has a lot to do with black and white thinking, mine, yours, battling over egos, battling over territory, wars. That's all based in the energy of pride.
Yeah.
And the next step above pride is courage. And courage is where we're actually looking at ourselves, where we look at our own flaws, our own faults. We have courage to change. We have courage to say, I'm sorry. We have courage to negotiate. We have courage to look at the benefit of every, right? I mean, and that's why that happens at that level.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so let's just talk about two of the emotions. So let's just pick two here. So let's say grief. Let's say someone's in a constant or a chronic level of grief, which is resonating at 75. And the primary emotion is regret associated with grief. Okay. And now, so someone might be like, hey, I'm experiencing grief, but I want joy. Listen, it's a big jump. How about we focus actually, believe it or not, on fear? Is the next level up, which is 100. And the anxiety associated with that is anxiety. So some people might be listening to this and being like, what are you talking about?
Those
like anxiety is no better than experiencing regret sort of thing.
From
But
an energetic
from an
level,
energetic standpoint, it's actually much more advantageous to experience anxiety rather than regret.
Yeah, it's so counterintuitive. And I have to say to people sometimes, would you just trust me? You hired me for a reason. Would you just trust me? Because it really works so well.
Yeah, it does.
But it's counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive. So from a sensation-based methodology, what I love to do with people is to deconstruct the emotion at the level someone's currently operating at. Let's say grief. So we actually deconstruct and work with and de-energize regret. By de-energize, I mean we just release our attachment to it, to experiencing that. And then we actually will use sensation-based methodology to stimulate anxiety. So we're deconstructing and diffusing the emotion at the current energy level, or the sensations that are associated with the emotion at the current energy level. And we're also modifying our sensations to the next level up.
Mhm.
So it would actually be stimulating something that would feel more anxiety activating, because anxiety has more energy in it than grief and regret does, right?
Mhm.
Grief and regret has a lot of inertia. Like, it just feels like you're getting sucked down, where anxiety actually is more activated, not super comfortable. Nobody really, I don't think, likes to experience anxiety, but it's on the path to the next one up, which would be experiencing actually desire is the kind of the next one up.
That's interesting. I haven't used it like that before, but that's really neat. You kind of gave me something to think about. Usually when I use this, I actually will go right for that next emotion, and I guess kind of similar actually to what you're saying, but have somebody actually conceptualize it as an emotion, and then they're like, wait, what, or whatever, and then actually have them feel the sensation based approach from
Mhm.
there. Because with a lot of these states, people are trying to suppress and not feel things.
Correct.
And one of the things that we do so well is allow people to feel the thing that they don't want to feel safely. And not just safely, but in not such a massive
Mhm.
way, so that it's kind of titrated, and then they can experience it. It's safe. It doesn't have to be such a big deal. It's not like dragging the demons out of the closet.
Yeah, and again, I love what you're connecting with here, especially when we come from the idea that we work with the sensations, not the emotions. And
Yeah.
when you do that on a regular basis, eventually people will have an experience of, oh, wait, the emotion is just a pattern. It's
Right.
just a pattern. And it really depends on how attached I am to the story that goes with that pattern.
Exactly.
And if we can help people have an embodied experience of deconstructing the pattern, that's how people can declare their independence from their lower emotional states.
Yeah. So I I when I think about what you're saying here, there are some people who, and I have at times been able to do this myself, just been able to snap from an emotion to an
Mhm.
emotion. But eventually, as humans, we will get stuck somewhere with an emotion because of the storyline and narrative associated with it. And so, yes, sometimes we can use the emotional content to help us change to where we want to go. However, at some point, that won't work, or it won't be sustainable 100% of
Mhm.
the time. So, when you know how to use the sensation based approach, it actually will be effective 100% of the time. We
Mhm.
have found that
Yep.
because there's that storyline and narrative associated with the emotion. And to be honest, I want to, let me put in an I want instead of I don't want. I want to be able to experience the higher states of consciousness and not necessarily be attached to the storyline and the narrative at that stage either.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, because the higher we actually move up the states of consciousness, the more natural shedding of attachment to anything that we're experiencing
Yeah.
happens. And that's a correlative to these higher states of awareness. It's actually that just letting go of the attachment to it
Which is
a
what we're
part
doing
is a
with the
part of it.
sensation based
Yeah,
approach.
exactly.
So people get used to being able to unattach, unhook from the narrative
Hmm.
using a sensation based approach, which actually helps them to move up into the higher states of consciousness anyway.
Yeah,
Can I tell you my very favorite way to use this? I mean, I
absolutely.
use it,
Please.
I've used it a number of times. Very, very helpful. I still use it today. Now it's just easier because I've done it a bunch of times. For me, I'm a person who, guilt's the general flavor of, what happens when I'm challenging limiting beliefs or my conditioning
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So I can get caught up down here with the fear, grief kind of place, and guilt really drags me down. But for me, when I find myself lingering in those lower states, one of the things I remember a lot is how important anger is, because it has that
Hmm.
fuel and I allow myself to be angry. And I'm saying that for anybody who's listening who has any kind of feelings, shame, guilt, whatever it is, about the fact that you feel angry sometimes. I've literally had clients come to me, and when I say, what do you want to work on? They say, I don't want to feel angry anymore. Like, well, okay, so you're a human being. I don't know that that's a reasonable goal. However, I can help you to feel angry less, and we can help to work with anger, but there's so much societal crap around anger. And I've come to really appreciate anger on so many levels, but I can use it to help me bridge, and then from there move from anger to something else. But it really has been because I can feel that in my butt. It feels like fuel.
Yeah,
right?
there's more energy. Exactly. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
Than those lower levels. There's more energy, so I can and feel those sensations and help it move, so I can keep going.
Yeah, and
up.
You're 100% right. When you look at the map of consciousness, if you look at the very lowest levels like shame, guilt, apathy, and grief, they're all very heavy, very de-energized.
They can be really hard to get out
Yeah,
of.
very stuck, right? Like you're stuck in quicksand.
Yeah.
And then as you go up higher, fear, desire, anger, right? Those are more energized states.
They really are.
So yeah, so anger is a great, can be a great springboard. If you can get to anger, be a great springboard then to go to pride. And then boom, courage is just the next step above that.
It's right there. It's not
so
that
you're
far.
just kind of going up a little bit farther. And then after that, every level higher than that, there's a exponential increase in your level of resonance. So part of it too is, if you think about it, if this were a ladder, at the lower end, the steps between the ladder are very close. It's like little step, little step, little step, little step. And you might be like, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not getting. And then once you get to 200, now it's like you're stretching between steps. And every step is a bigger jump. Every step is a bigger leap because of the way that the numbers start to exponentially increase going up. So you can start at the bottom, I guess, take refuge in the idea that they're little steps. Take little steps, get some momentum. And as you get higher, the bigger leaps of consciousness start to come forward.
Yeah. And like I said in the beginning, it's so much fun to watch within myself and with clients when you change your level of resonance and everything changes. And to watch that happen for people and then have them be like, yeah, what do you mean? Like, this is just how I am. Like, yes. So good.
Cool.
So good.
Thanks so much for the conversation today, Ani. I so appreciate our conversation on the levels of consciousness and the emotional integration around those, and what do we do about it? And
so much fun.
So much. I feel my level of resonance is already growing. I'm in bliss right now.
You are?
Yes.
I'm resonating at the frequency of the lake.
It's time to go jump
in and have a picnic.
Jump in the lake. All right, everybody. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks for joining us on this week's Somatic Coaching Academy podcast.
Bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself. Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.